The night began like any other, a long, exhausting day at the office, the kind that grinds you down to nothing. I'd spent hours buried in spreadsheets, my eyes stinging from the harsh blue glare of the monitor, while emails piled up faster than I could clear them. By the time I finally escaped the sterile glow of the office lights, the city had already slipped into darkness. The air outside bit into my skin, sharp and unforgiving, seeping through the thin fabric of my jacket. The streets lay empty, muted by the dampness of a recent drizzle, and the pavement shimmered under the dim glow of the streetlights, every step echoing in the quiet. All I could think about was getting home, a hot shower, maybe a quick microwave dinner, and then straight to bed. I pulled out my phone and ordered an Uber, barely glancing at the driver's details. A black sedan with the name John attached to it. No last name, no profile picture, just John. I didn't think much of it. My brain was too foggy with exhaustion to register anything beyond the estimated arrival time. Within minutes, headlights pierced through the mist, and the black car rolled up to the curb. I slid into the back seat, pulling the door shut behind me with a dull thud. The interior was dimly lit by the greenish hue of the dashboard. I noticed immediately that the driver didn't greet me. He didn't ask if I was Alex, or confirm the destination like they usually do. He simply sat there, staring straight ahead, his hands resting on the wheel, fingers tapping rhythmically. Tap, tap, tap. His knuckles were pale, skin stretched tight over bone. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was having a bad night too. A strange, unsettling smell hung in the air. It was faint but persistent, like the sour tang of sweat mixed with something sharp and metallic. I shifted uncomfortably, trying not to breathe too deeply. My tired mind offered a dozen mundane explanations. A messy previous passenger, maybe a spilt drink, but none of them settled my nerves. I fumbled with my seatbelt, the click of the buckle oddly loud in the confined space. As soon as I was strapped in, the car lurched forward, sending a jolt through my spine. John merged onto the road with an aggression that caught me off guard. He cut off a sedan, drawing a blare of a horn that echoed through the empty streets. My phone vibrated in my hand, but when I glanced down, the screen was dark. No signal. That was strange. We were still in the heart of the city, surrounded by high-rises and blinking traffic lights. I tapped the screen, hoping to pull up the map, but nothing loaded. A prickle of unease ran up my neck, and I found myself watching the road through the window, trying to memorize landmarks in case I needed them later. At first, the ride seemed typical enough, but after a few minutes, I noticed something unsettling. The route on the app showed a straight path home, but John was taking turns that didn't match up. I waited, giving him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there was construction or a detour I didn't know about. But when he made a sharp left onto a narrow, dimly lit street, I couldn't stay quiet. "Hey, I think you missed the turn," I said, my voice forced into a casual tone that didn't match the tightness in my chest. John didn't react. His fingers kept tapping on the wheel, a hollow, repetitive sound that seemed to sync with my quickening pulse. "Sir?" I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. My hand tightened around my phone, knuckles white. I swiped at the screen, desperate for a signal, but all I got was a spinning wheel where the bars should be. The city lights grew dimmer with every passing block, swallowed by shadows as we left the familiar streets behind. High-rises gave way to warehouses, then to empty lots and rusting fences. Streetlights became scarce, their dim halos barely piercing the thickening darkness. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cracking with the weight of rising panic. "Where are we going?" There was a pause. The tapping stopped. When John finally spoke, his voice was low and flat, each syllable devoid of any warmth. "Shortcut." That was it. One word. No explanation, no reassurance, just a single hollow note that hung in the air like smoke. A chill slid down my spine. I no longer bothered hiding my fear. My eyes darted around the car, searching for anything that could help. A door lock, the handle, something sharp. I considered throwing myself out of the moving vehicle, but the speedometer needle was buried deep into the right, and the pavement outside was a dark blur. All I could do was sit there, frozen in the back seat of that car, as the city I knew disappeared behind us, swallowed whole by the night. I tried the door handle, locked. Of course, I forced a laugh. Look, man, I don't mind paying extra, just take me back to the main road. John didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, he reached for something in the front seat. My breath caught in my throat as I saw what it was: duct tape and zip ties. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to do something. I reached into my pocket, gripping my keys tightly. Without thinking, I jabbed the sharpest one into the back of his neck. He let out a strangled yell, swerving the car wildly. I used the moment to slam my foot against the door, trying to break it open. The car skidded to a stop near an old rundown building. Before I could react, John turned around. His face was expressionless, but his eyes burned with something inhuman. He pulled a knife from his coat. I scrambled back, my hands fumbling for anything to protect myself. Then I saw it. The unlock button near his armrest. I lunged forward, slamming my fist into it. The door clicked open and I tumbled out onto the rough pavement. I ran. I didn't look back. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I kept going. I heard his footsteps pounding behind me, steady and unhurried. He wasn't running, he was stalking me. I spotted a dimly lit gas station in the distance, my only chance. I pushed myself harder, my vision blurring. I reached the glass doors and yanked them open, stumbling inside. The cashier, a bored-looking guy in his early 20s, barely glanced up. "Dude, you okay?" I turned to look behind me, expecting John to be right there, but he wasn't. The parking lot was empty. No car, no man, no sign he had ever existed. I gasped for air, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My entire body trembled as my mind raced through the events of the last hour. Had I imagined it? Was it some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion? My hands were shaking when I reached into my pocket. My phone buzzed against my palm, making me flinch. Service had returned, the familiar icon glowing in the corner of my screen. I exhaled sharply, swallowing the lump in my throat as I unlocked my phone. One notification blinked at me, fresh and unread. My stomach dropped as I read the words, "Your driver John has arrived." I stared at the message, my blood turning to ice. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to tap it. The app still showed him at my original location, as if he had never picked me up, as if none of it had happened. My breathing grew shallow as the reality of the situation settled in. I had been in that car. I had fought for my life, and yet, according to Uber, the ride had never started. The cashier noticed my pale face and called the cops. I barely registered what he was saying. I was still locked onto my phone screen, unable to shake the feeling that I had just escaped something far worse than I could comprehend. When the police arrived, I told them everything, every detail, every turn we had taken, every terrifying second of the ordeal. They searched the area, scouring the streets for any sign of the car I had described, but they found nothing. No black sedan, no bloodstains on the pavement, no records of a driver named John. It was as if he had never existed. Like the whole night had been a nightmare, only I had witnessed, but I knew it wasn't a dream. The torn fabric of my clothes, the deep bruises staining my skin, and the sharp ache in my ribs were all proof of the truth. John had been real. His empty stare, the rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the wheel, the stench of sweat and metal, every detail burned into my mind. I tried explaining it to the police, but without a license plate, a last name, or a trace of him on the app, there was nothing they could do. It was as if he had slipped through the cracks of reality, a shadow that vanished with the dawn. But I couldn't forget. Not when every dark car that passed made my pulse race. Not when the quiet hum of an engine dragged me back to that back seat, trapped and helpless. The world moved on, but I remained stuck in that moment, my mind replaying every detail, every whispered threat, every sharp turn of the wheel. I haven't taken an Uber since that night. I avoid cabs altogether. I'd rather walk miles in the rain, take the last crowded bus, or sleep under the harsh glow of streetlights than step into a stranger's car again. Because sometimes a ride doesn't just take you home, it takes you somewhere you might never return from. It takes you into the dark, where screams are swallowed by the hum of tires on wet pavement, where the city lights blur and disappear, and the worst part? No one even knows you're gone. You become nothing more than a missed call, an unread message, a memory that fades with each sunrise. I escaped that night, but a part of me is still there, still lost, still waiting for someone to notice I'm not home.